Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Ngo, and these are your 3:30 headlines. Picket lines have now expanded to include 22 sites involving more than 4,000 striking public service workers as their labor dispute with the province escalates. Physical pickets are now up at certain government offices in Nanaimo, Kamloops, Kelowna, Cranbrook, Nelson, Fort St. Johnson, and Smithers. These communities join Vancouver, Victoria, and Surrey as places where union members have set up picket lines after launching job action last week. The BC provincial government has shut down water taps in some parts of the province to help Chinook salmon. Low levels of water have threatened the endangered species. Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship, Radine Neal, says that when the stream flows drop to critical levels, the government must take regulatory action. High school students across BC are finding issues in taking required classes to graduate. Some districts, such as Surrey, lack the class space to hold all the students that need to take those classes. Students are potentially having to resort to hybrid classes or do it entirely online. The problem is that some students are not well equipped for online learning. BC Highway Patrol says that it has impounded roughly 60 cars off of the Sea to Sky Highway over the last week. More than half of those impounds occurred during the Labor Day weekend. BC Highway Corporal Michael McLaughlin said in a news release, quote, "There are still too many people driving unimaginably fast or impaired on Sea to Sky. And while it's hard to believe, we keep catching people doing both at the same time." Edmonton police are publicly accusing Crown prosecutors of failing the public trust by proposing to pursue a plea deal in the blunt trauma death of an 8-year-old girl. A letter by interim Edmonton Police Chief Warren Dreichel references the case of a 27-year-old woman who has been charged with first-degree murder, but police say is set instead to plead out to 8 years for manslaughter. The chief says such a light sentence would constitute a miscarriage of justice, and a police investigation has uncovered evidence of significant child abuse. The letter to Alberta's Assistant Deputy Minister in charge of the Crown prosecutors is asking Kim Goddard to review the case and put a stop to the plea deal. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she will reiterate her policy demand as Mark Carney visits his Liberal caucus in Edmonton. Smith says she is looking for real movement on federal policies that she said have plummeted Alberta's economy. She says Carney must either repeal or drastically revise those policies, and hopes to see real action from Carney by the year's end. Canada's Agriculture Minister says any decision to ease tariffs on electric vehicles from China would have to take into consideration impacts on other sectors. Heath MacDonald said the government hasn't been told directly what the Chinese government wants, but it is something that's being considered. He says the review is still underway.
To speculate on any decisions that we make and to put that speculation into possible jeopardy of another industry or sector wouldn't be appropriate.
Canada slapped a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles last year after the US did, and committed to a review within 12 months. China later imposed tariffs on Canadian canola in what was widely seen as a retaliatory move. The Manitoba government will have officers stationed at the province's largest hospital 24 hours a day due to rising safety concerns. The province is providing $2.3 million in funding to the officers, as well as the addition of 5 new weapon detection scanners at the main public entrance of the hospital. The move comes as nurses made the rare decision last month to declare the hospital too dangerous to work in. An Ontario mayor wants to literally clamp down on Quebec drivers who get parking tickets in his town. Gananoque Mayor John Beddoes suggests placing clamps on the tires of Quebec-plated vehicles issued parking tickets. Beddoes says Ontario doesn't have an agreement with Quebec on parking enforcement, so Quebecers face no consequences if they don't pay their tickets. But Town Councillor David Osmond criticizes the proposal and worries it risks discouraging Quebec tourists from visiting. Chicago residents have started making changes to their weekly routines as Trump's immigration raid looms. The third largest city in the U.S. is seemingly next on President Trump's crackdown on crime and illegal immigration. People have started carrying around more identification with them, including passports, while some teachers in the city want to move classes online. The lack of information on what Trump fully plans to do is causing panic in the city. The U.S. Supreme Court will quickly consider whether President Donald Trump has the power to impose sweeping tariffs. The justices will hear arguments in November, which is surprisingly fast by the typical standards of the U.S.'s highest court. Small businesses and the U.S. states that challenged the tariffs in court also agreed to the accelerated timetable. They argue Trump illegally used emergency powers to set import taxes on goods from nearly every country in the world, nearly driving their businesses into bankruptcy. Far-right conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has asked the U.S. Supreme Court to hear his appeal on the $1.4 billion judgment against him for calling the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting a hoax. The InfoWars host argues in a filing to the court that the judgment for defamation and infliction of emotional distress violates his constitutional rights. The shooting killed 20 children and 6 adults in Newtown, Connecticut. The legal judgment came in lawsuits filed by some of the shooting victims' relatives, whose lawyers dispute Jones's claim to the Supreme Court. The Trump administration is urging public health agencies to prioritize investigations of vaccine injuries, prescription drug use, and autism's causes. The call is part of a new Make America Healthy Again report released Tuesday. Overseen by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the report aims to end childhood diseases in the U.S. by refocusing public health on his so-called MAHA movement's priorities. The report suggests using personal medical records and health insurance data to investigate diseases and disorders, including autism. It also addresses issues like ultra-processed food consumption and water quality, and calls for increased oversight of prescription drug ads, especially in those by social media influencers. Nepal's Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli has resigned from his post after protests the previous day turned deadly. Demonstrators protesting a social media ban and government corruption were met with fire outside Kathmandu's parliament building. 19 people were killed and another 100 were injured. In the aftermath, Oli has stepped down as PM, and the country's social media ban was lifted. Despite this, some demonstrators are still protesting. Explosions were heard in Qatar's capital, causing widespread condemnation. Israel struck Qatar's capital of Doha, claiming they were attacking Hamas's headquarters. This is now the second time Qatar has been directly attacked since the war in Gaza began. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says the strike does not serve either U.S. or Israeli interests.
President Trump believes this unfortunate incident could serve as an opportunity for peace. The president also spoke to the Emir and Prime Minister of Qatar and thanked them for their support and friendship to our country. He assured them that such a thing will not happen again on their soil.
Qatar has called the incident a, quote, cowardly Israeli attack. Canada is sending $2.6 million in humanitarian aid to Pakistan after the country suffered through months of flooding. Rain, floods, and heavy monsoons have ravaged the nation since June, killing over 900. Canada is also sending $250,000 to the Pakistan Red Crescent Society. Pakistan has seen a rise in natural disasters, which experts have linked to climate change. Apple has announced the new iPhone 17. The company has unveiled 4 new models that are said to be the thinnest smartphones yet. They have also added a better camera and longer-lasting batteries. Despite U.S. tariffs, Apple is seemingly sticking to the same price tag it has had for all new iPhone releases. That's all the news for now, but hold on, we still got some sports to cover. The NFL has made their decision regarding Eagles defensive lineman Jalen Carter. He's been fined over $57,000 for spitting at Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott in their game against Dallas on Thursday. Carter has miraculously avoided a suspension, despite the league putting an emphasis on respect and sportsmanship. Carter will dress for the Eagles game against the Kansas City Chiefs next Sunday. The Toronto Blue Jays have announced that shortstop Bo Bichette has been placed on the 10-day IL with a left knee sprain. In a crucial blow, the Jays lose one of their stars during Saturday's loss to the Yankees.
Into right field, a base hit. Here comes Bichette. Bellinger comes up throwing, and they got him at the plate. And Bichette a little bit slow to get up and limping and favoring his left leg.
The Jays called up outfielder Joey Loperfido in response to this move. They play the Astros today at 4 p.m. With the World Cup less than a year away, BC Place will have to soon start the process of swapping out the artificial turf for natural grass. FIFA requires all fields be natural for international play. BC Place, however, uses artificial turf for both the BC Lions and Vancouver Whitecaps. Former BC SPL soccer player Brendan Nicol says that the change in turf should help limit injuries during the event.
Looking at, for example, slide tackling, right? The turf is a lot more grippy sometimes, especially when you can catch on your cleats. It's really bad in the joints too, where the grass and dirt's a lot more cushioning and shock absorbent. So a lot more injuries do occur, especially in the ankles and knees. So a lot of young players really have to be careful when they're first starting out their careers.
Speaking of soccer, Canada has defeated Wales in their friendly today 1-0. Derek Cornelius had the lone goal as Wales could not find the back of the net. Canada has now won back-to-back friendlies as the World Cup quickly approaches. For weather, it's a nice sunny day today with temperatures at 20 degrees. There will be a brief moment where the temperature reaches a high of 21 degrees. For the evening, should be some clear skies heading into tomorrow. For next morning, it will be a mix of sun and clouds with temperatures in the high teens. So it won't be too cold, but also not too warm either. That's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, I'm James Ngo, and you're listening to BCIT's The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
I would recommend this program for anyone that isn't sure what kind of job they want in media, because you learn everything from like public relations to communications to video editing, like radio, TV. So you do get a lot of experience in all the different fields in media.